Brother, are you all right?
No, I am not all right. I just shared a bottle of Kanar with Damar. That rhymes.
You're drunk.
Of course I'm drunk.
And good afternoon, everyone. You know, it's rather fitting, Quark's last words there at the intro today, because, well, Furball, you should know better. Even when you're drunk or hungover, you still gotta show up to your insurgency meetings.
Well, to be fair, he is a warrant officer. They don't do much.
Except drink. So what's the frickin' excuse? And also, I will give Gio a pass because he is exhausted. It is 9 p.m. where he is, if I remember correctly.
No, it should be 10 where he
10,
is.
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of late at night on a Saturday, and he was doing stuff with his family all day. So again, I can forgive him. But you, Furball? Yeah. Should have known better there, buddy. So, for those who are wondering, we do have a couple topics to talk about today. One is actually something that I came across that is kind of where I was thinking for a while on a lot of the questions of continuity. And to me, this is what makes the most sense for how the actual timelines in Star Trek will actually work out. So, gotta enjoy Anti-Trekker, which a week ago posted a video which I am about to put into the live chat for future reference for everyone, where he goes over what would be seen as an analysis of what parts of the Star Trek universe actually apply to what timeline, where there are essentially three of them. You have your Prime timeline, the First Contact timeline, and the Kelvin timeline, which to me makes the most sense, because in that instance you have the original series, the animated series, TNG, DS9, and Voyager as your Prime timeline, including Star Trek Generations, the first of the movies. The divergence point comes in with Star Trek First Contact, where they go back in time, they save Zephyr and Cochrane, they make sure First Contact happens. But this is where we get Star Trek Enterprise, which would start to explain some of the differences between what we've seen in Enterprise and then the questions of how would it relate to what we see in the rest of the series to that point, the rest of the franchise to that point. So it does kind of make sense that in the First Contact timeline is also where you end up with the manipulations with the Klingons, where they tried to tie it into the Prime timeline, but still not quite there. Oh, we have better pictures to show too. But only when we get to that topic. Right now we're talking that timeline. Jay, did you actually get to see that Anti-Trekker video?
No, I did not.
So it pretty much puts Discovery, if I remember correctly, Discovery and Enterprise are in their own timeline. Obviously the Kelvin movies are their own timeline, which has already been pretty well established and accepted. But the whole difference is to harmonize and to logically account for the series Enterprise and Discovery. The only way to do it is have them either in their own timeline or their separate timelines in and of themselves.
Right. Which makes sense. That's pretty understandable. I would even go a step further and say that if we were to include Star Trek Online, it would have to be its own separate timeline because it takes place after the events of Voyager. And since Voyager, the end of Voyager is its own temporal anomaly, it'd have to be its own timeline at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it would. And so, Ugly German Truce, who said anything about Enterprise series being in a different timeline? When you look at the design of the ship, how it differed from what was established as pre-Federation, not just in technology, but in design of the ships, it doesn't exactly jive with what is established canon on screen. Think back to, what was it, the Corbomite maneuver or Balance of Terror, when Spock talks about the first Federation Romulan War, which took place during the time period that was covered in Star Trek Enterprise. But the technology displayed on Enterprise did not match with the original tellings from TOS. So, one of the ways you can justify that is by Zephyr Cochrane and possibly a few others witnessing the more advanced technology that the Enterprise E had with it when it came back to deal with the Borg issue that was trying to stop first contact in the first place. And do you concur with that?
I do. Sorry, I was looking at LRJ88's comment. It does look very nice, though. Looks more like, let's see if this shit works. Trying to figure out what he's talking about there. Probably the video, maybe. Anyways, yeah, no, I agree with you that the explanation of Enterprise being a different timeline because of the differences in the way Spock talks about the first Romulan Earth wars, basically, and the ones that we hear about the build up to in the Enterprise series and then the subsequent novels afterwards. If you haven't read the Kobayashi Maru series, it's a very good series. It is very different because again, even in the show, you get Romulan cloaking technology, but when Spock talks about it previously, he doesn't mention it, So
doesn't mention it, and it's actually treated as a new unknown thing. So, and that's actually is brought up in the video by Anti-Trekkers. Like, it shows that divergence between what was conveyed as established knowledge amongst Starfleet in TOS and compared it to Enterprise, and that's where a plausible justification is that deviation in the timeline, and you get that whole butterfly effect. And I do have to agree, never imply Star Trek Online is canon, because it is a non-Paramount controlled entity. If it was done with more of the actual IP holders' input, then you would be in a realm to actually hold it as a piece of canon. As it stands right now, at best it is beta canon. Depending on what they do with information going forward, since STO does take place in the relative future of the franchise.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was just going with it, was just that if it were to ever become canon, it would have to be its own separate timeline because of the change in the at the end of Voyager. So
Only
reading Boland's comment. Not to mention, if Captain Pike is a part of the timeline, his helmsman talks about the time barrier being broken, inferring warp drive to be the non-existent scientists on Talos 4.
Which doesn't jive with Enterprise at all. Yeah, and again, that is the thing, is when you are establishing a franchise the way Star Trek was being established back in the 60s, is very tough to keep things internally consistent when you had so many writers and so many arguments and issues in the background that ended up directly affecting what was shown on screen and how things were put out there. From Ugly German Tourist, only problem I have with the NX-01 is the laziness of the production design, reusing the Akira class with a steampunk skin in copper, and turning nacelles and that gondola upside down. Otherwise, I can live with speculations like Ex Astris Scientitia, that, if he recalls correctly, wrote about it being Earth technology with Constitution class being a combination of Earth and Vulcan technology.
E.g., Spock's control panel being an example of Vulcan tech.
And also weapon systems from the Andorians. Keep in mind, there was that facet to it as well, where they've already gone back and pretty much covered that the Constitution class, it's the technology of the Constitution class was seen to be a hodgepodge and a mixing of the different races, where the human influence was the visuals, the Tellarite was on engineering and life support, Andorians were the offensive weapons, Vulcans did help with propulsion and defensive predominantly. So that's where it makes it a fascinating presentation of the technologies when you have that many different mindsets going into it.
Mm-hmm. Thinking about it, what could we do? What would happen if 4 or 5 different car manufacturers got together to make one car?
Yeah, ideally, in the best case scenario, you take the best of what works from each one and put it together and try to do it in a appeasing visual aesthetic, and you're going to get something like the Constitution class.
Oh, LRJ-88. Along come the Ferengi and just buy it afterwards, if they haven't already stolen it.
Well, has anyone seen a Ferengi before the 24th century?
Not that I recall. Well, actually, if we go to the Enterprise timeline, yes.
Yeah, Archer. And which I can understand why Enterprise did. They had to take some liberties with stuff like that just to try to keep interest in the show. I will admit that a number of decisions they made, story-wise and everything, it had to be done with a mindset of keeping viewers engaged and trying to grow and expand on the fan base.
Yeah. I think, having not heard any of the backlash to Enterprise before I sat down and watched it, I actually enjoy Enterprise a bit more than the average fan does. But at the same time, I also sit there and gripe about some of the issues with it too, because I'm like, oh, come on, this does not make sense. But now hearing the base premise of the triple timeline theory, it would make sense if its own timeline, it would have these different changes to it, you know.
Well, and keep in mind, in Enterprise, there was even mentions from Archer talking about Cochrane ranting and railing about a cybernetic based life form with the intent and desire to essentially destroy humanity as well as every other race, which is directly from First Contact. So you do have that tie in there. Um, a facet of Cochrane's character that wasn't ever uh, talked about before. And with the record keeping capability of the Federation and even the late Earth, United Earth era, and how it pretty much seamlessly transferred into the Federation, there is no reason for things like that to fall through the cracks of history with the near unlimited, if not unlimited, data storage capacity that the society in general appears to have.
Sorry, looking at the chat here.
Yeah.
No, I'm familiar with some of the car manufacturers doing projects together. It's just it would be interesting to see if, like, I would say all the American manufacturers, but who are we kidding? There's like two. But you
Yeah.
know what I mean.
Yes, Monk Mayfair. That is. So, if you didn't, for anyone who missed the first few minutes of this, the the YouTube channel Anti Tracker a week ago did a video where he put out and explained his rationale for accepting a similar theorem that I do when it comes to the continuity of Star Trek, of there being three distinct timelines. You have the Prime timeline, which is the primary series that we all know. You have the Kelvin timeline, which is the J.J. Abrams red matter creating a black hole to take a couple people back in time, and causing deviations their timeline. But then you also have the proposition of there being what he termed the First Contact timeline, where there were repercussions from the Enterprise E going back in time to ensure that First Contact happened. And that's where Star Trek Enterprise and Discovery come into play, is in that third timeline.
Oh, Mark Beisner. When I quit thinking about how the continuity works and just watch the show, I enjoy Enterprise a lot more.
Oh, yes.
This is where my stance for the third season of Enterprise being the better season out of all of them is because it actually had, for the most part, with the exception of the one time travel back to the 1990s, early 2000s episode, it was a pretty steady plot going through the Delphic Expanse. You know, it was fairly thought out, not the best, but for what they had to work with at the time. I think it's probably the best overall arching story from episode to episode. Until you get to the end when somehow magically they're saved and sent back to World War II. But
Enterprise should have gone on for 7 seasons, ending with season 3. Huh?
Saying that season 3 should have been season 7, and there should have been 4 more seasons.
I don't know, because I think with season 4, had it not been cut off at the knees from a production standpoint and also being truncated because of canceling the show, it had the opportunity to start tying up timelines and actually transition to the actual foundation of the Federation.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, they were trying to take what the novelization of the Kobayashi Maru series, which was the Romulan War series, with Trip being a spy for Section 31. Um, they were going to try and turn all that into, one and a half, 2 seasons. But since they got cut off at the knees, like you said, they ran it as a book series. But they still got a full fourth season. They just ended it with the stupidest episode ever.
Well, and that brings into question: were the events of Enterprise actually close to the actual history, or was it all just a hollow novel created by or for Riker?
LRJ88, if you read the book series, starting with Kobayashi Maru, and then I forget what the Romulan War titles are, but they're directly after. When Trip gets taken by, where is it? I want to say it's not demons. I don't know. I don't remember which episode in season 4 it was. I actually know. I think it was "Are These the Voyages?" Because that's where Trip gets killed in action, with pirates coming to try and take him.
Mm.
They expand upon the story that was, and put it in the book. Trip is actually taken in by Section 31 and going and given a facelift surgery to make him look more Romulan, so him and his handler can go in and infiltrate the Warp 7 project of the Romulans. So.
Yeah. As we know,
Ugly German Truth has it right there.
Yeah, and that's where, again, the material and what they could have done with established history were there. It just... Star Trek is a really difficult IP to deal with when you look at this, because there's been so much material done and actually put as what would be canon on air, that to maintain an internal consistency is difficult, to say the least.
Well, Deanna in First Contact sums up time, talking about time travel, pretty good. You have to admit, it is a good explanation for it. There's no time to talk about time.
You simply don't have the time. Or how about how many times the character in Star Trek, as soon as you start talking temporal mechanics, they just get a headache.
They get that glazed over look.
If J.J. Abrams did another movie, should it be the Romulan War? No.
No. Next, we need to move on to the Kelvin timeline TNG.
Yeah.
Where Data is the captain.
Oh, jeez. Oh, what? So Picard doesn't get stabbed by Nausicaans and tones it down a little bit over the years to actually be a little more diplomatic? Monk Mayfair, I am right with you. Instead of frickin' Discovery, CBS should have bought the IP that was Axanar, brought that production team in, and made that. Because they actually had the intent of it being visually correct and historically correct, given the material between TOS, FASFA, and the other beta sources, making it all work together.
Alright, hold on. Who directed this? Oh, never mind. I wonder why it's doing so good at the box office. Terminator Dark Fate. I thought that Michael Bay had some hand in the movie for some reason.
So
But there's no way James Cameron would let him come within 50 football fields of that production.
So, from Jeremy Mendoza, which timeline is the Picard show to be placed? We don't know. And honestly, at this point, I wouldn't believe them if they said it. I think they're trying to allude it to being prime timeline post, like, what is it, like 20, 25 years post Nemesis?
Yeah, let me pull it up here. Oh, of course, they still haven't said anything.
Yeah.
But its popularity's gone down 67 points.
Jeez. Oh, and part of that is they are trying to slam so many cameos and throwbacks to prior successful Trek series in it that it's kind of watering it down a bit to almost where they're trying a bit too hard to please everyone. And here's the thing, if you try to please everyone, inevitably you're going to piss off everyone.
Sorry, I saw a picture that looked like they took a scene from Discovery. Yeah, they did. God damn it. Hold on, I'll share. If I'm suffering, you're all suffering.
Oh no.
Yeah. I saw that in the saw that right there. Or where was it back one more? Yeah, I saw it right here. I'm like, no, not allowed. And then it clicked on it, and then when I clicked on this, I got some other character.
Sure, yeah, because it goes right into it.
Yeah.
Mark Beiser. Mark Beiser. I've not watched Discovery at all. Am I missing out on something worth watching?
I still haven't watched the last episode of season 1. I'm tempted to pick up season 2 since it just came out yesterday.
Let's put it this way. Discovery had so many issues in production and filming and overall direction of the series itself. It showed in season 1. To where it didn't have a truly coherent goal or path, to where almost they tried too hard to lead off a series with a series-long story arc instead of going a little more piecemeal and have character development be your overarching tie-in from episode to episode. Because when you look at Star Trek historically, the successful series do that.
Never heard of Discovery. What are you talking about? From Dora? Monk Mayfair. At Dora. Discovery, aka STD. Dora, let me repeat myself. I have never heard of Discovery.
Nice.
But no, the whole timeline thing with all these different series, with all these different canon, non-canon storylines that are out there, it's hard to keep track of them. And having at least 3 makes sense. And like I said, you can make a case for a 4th with the end of whatever comes after Voyager, if they still reference to Voyager getting back within 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if in Picard they say that Voyager still hasn't gotten back, then you can say that's part of the prime timeline. You know what I mean? Not that they're going to do that, but
yeah, who knows? And From NANA. I don't get it with all the reboots and remakes. Why not just do a continuation of TNG? One, that would make sense. Two, like Ugly German Truth said, that would take them requiring to have ideas of their own.
Well, you know what happens when they get ideas of their own. Enterprise. Discovery.
Yeah, and Leon, LRJ88 just hit the nail on the head again. Remember when you could watch a single episode of Star Trek and just feel like it was actually a complete episode as well as make sense as the series progressed?
Yeah. I mean, you didn't have the timeline continuity in the original series like you do with TNG and going forward, but an episode wrapped up nice, neat, and then if they reference back to it, it would make sense. Oh yeah, this event did happen. Whereas with Discovery, even some of Voyager episodes, you're like, wait, when did this happen? Because they reference things that didn't happen or that you didn't see happen.
Yeah. So Dora's trying to hint at the IP ownership between Paramount and CBS. So the difference... This is where it gets tricky, because last I knew, which is before rumors of the two companies trying to hash it out and go back under one umbrella for ownership of the IP, as of the production of Star Trek Discovery and of the beginnings of Star Trek Picard's production, pre-show production, CBS holds the IP for the television shows. Paramount owns all of the movie rights and the movie IPs. And they split it up that way. So, technically, CBS can do a follow-on to any of the series without any issues.
Oh. Yeah, I was waiting for you to read that.
Yeah. Nice. No, it was chlamydia.
Oh, are we bringing Futurama into this now?
Oh, clam up already.
Speaking of Futurama, Gio's posting our little group. Did you watch that video clip?
I did not, actually.
Let's see if I can freeze frame it here really quick. Hold on. Let's actually just watch it on YouTube.
Now, I think most of us can agree the Orville is the Star Trek that we've wanted. And it's a shame that it's not technically a Star Trek IP.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I just bought the Disney Plus package, which has the Hulu package into it. So I might actually be able to watch some Orville now.
Wait, Disney Plus includes Hulu?
Yes.
Huh. Fascinating.
Not as fascinating as this.
Ah. And it's actually a decent representation of the shape of the craft.
Before Fox gets a stick up their ass. Wait, doesn't Disney own Fox now that they got the rights to The Simpsons and all that other garbage too? The X-Men?
Possibly?
So when does Disney start owning CBS and Paramount, and then own Star Trek?
I hope not. I hope that never happens because they've already screwed up one franchise. Why do we want to let them screw up another? From Jeremy Mendoza, would you consider Stargate SG-1 and/or Farscape a good successor to Star Trek? In what sense? As enjoyable TV shows to watch, or as some sort of connection as a shared universe? Because if it's as watchable television shows, yeah. I actually took a when I get done watching a lot of the Star Trek back through, I this recent time I actually went back through and watched all of SG-1, then all of Atlantis, and Stargate Universe, which honestly I kind of wanted to see where Stargate Universe was going to end up going.
Yeah, I never got into the Stargate TV franchises because I was in the Navy at the time most of them were going on. So there's that. But
Yeah.
I never seem to be able to get into them now, so maybe one of these days I'll sit down and try and watch it.
Yeah. Although you can tell when watching SG-1 when Farscape ended because the cast pretty much moved over between the shows.
Hey, we're done with this series, so let's move them in to be part of your show now. Why? Because it'll make it look better.
well, what it was, if I remember correctly, what happened was the actors were still the two main actors.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Hold on, hold on. How is the chair force competent members of the military? My point exactly.
With the issues that they had at under NORAD, kind of makes you question it.
I mean, all you have to do is look at the movie War Games for proof of that.
Or Iron Eagle letting a frickin' teenager run off with an F-16.
Then there's the movie Broken Arrow. Let's not talk about that. Why did we tangent off onto military stuff again?
Someone made a comment about it. But anyways, as I was saying, so if I remember correctly, Ben Browder and Claudia Black were still under contract with Sci-Fi, but they had decided to kill the Farscape franchise because the series wasn't getting the viewership. And it coincided with them tweaking the cast of SG-1 to where O'Neill got promoted and was no longer on the SG-1. He was now actually in a higher leadership role, which he didn't want but kept, but really didn't want to be there, but he did it anyways. And so they had to replace him, and then Teal'c was off doing his own thing, so while he was still back and forth there, he still had another spot there to deal with, and with Jackson going from Ascension to back to everything else he had to deal with and transition to, they pretty much had to reconstitute the team on the fly, which I'm surprised they didn't try to do something like that earlier in SG-1.
Sorry, I'm responding to Ugly German Truth's latest comment. There we go. Click the link if you want to know which one's the best. You should already know which one I would be picking.
True. You know, I wish I knew. But anyways, so funny how a topic I anticipated being about a half hour because of the sidetracks took a good 40 minutes. Typical.
Well, there's only two of us, so I mean, if the other two were here, this probably would have stretched to an hour.
I don't know. I think Gio would have really been pressing for the next topic, which is the primary topic, which is the ultimate topic for Trek. And it's the question, who do you prefer? Picard or Kirk? Which really clues into the mentality that you would actually have. Although, arguably the most undiplomatic yet diplomatic answer I've heard was actually, I forget which episode of The Big Bang Theory it was, but it was where Leonard was telling Penny about how he came to have Sheldon as a roommate. And the question that just allowed Leonard to get into the door, Kirk or Picard? And does anyone remember the answer?
Never watched well, let me rephrase that. I've never watched a full episode of Big Bang Theory.
So the preferred answer from Sheldon that he wanted to hear from his potential roommates, because oh boy, that character had issues.
Well, yeah.
The answer that he gave was Kirk over Picard, but TNG over TOS.
Okay. Talk about milquetoast fence sitting.
Yeah. And if I told you what I'm doing, my answer is it's easy to guess. Dora drinking the Earl Grey tea. Now, here's a question. A tea like Earl Grey, who the hell drinks it cold?
I don't know. I'm not a tea drinker, so I wouldn't be able to tell you.
The only tea I know of that is routinely and properly drank cold is sun tea or sweet tea.
Yeah, sometimes green tea, but yeah.
Now, green tea actually is best warm.
I like I said, I'm not a tea drinker, and sorry, I was closing up my Facebook page, and one of my friends has a weird picture on there, so I'm like, okay, nope, turn away.
But so, where do you fall on the spectrum of Kirk versus Picard?
To me, it really comes down to what are you looking for in your captain? If you're looking for somebody who, because they both outthink their opponents, they both try to do whatever they can to get past the no-win situation without, losing. The difference is how they intellectually think about the situations and how they react to the situations. And again, I'm milquetoast fence sitting here, but if I had to choose one, I would probably go with Picard, mostly just because I grew up more on TNG than I did TOS. But I can appreciate what Kirk set in the way of being the captain of the Enterprise. That he's the one who made the chair so enormous to fill that every other captain that came subsequently after him felt like they were too small for the big chair. Like take for example the beginning of Generations, when they're on the Enterprise B, and the new captain wanted Kirk to sit in the center chair, send us out on our first voyage, yada yada yada, because Kirk was there. If Kirk wasn't there, I don't think it would have had the media presence that it did. They wouldn't have made it a big deal. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you definitely have. You owe a lot of the follow-on Trek to Kirk as portrayed by Shatner. It really is an iconic role that the majority of the viewing population, even if they're not Star Trek fans, they understand the references that are made in pop culture to his particular delivery of the character. And you have other avenues to thank for that, but when it comes to it, yeah, when you look at it, you gotta, if you're going with the command style dynamic,
Dora has a comment to you.
Oh, the Weird Al image was caught by Jay Brown there. But when you try to evaluate the command styles, it really is a tough one because you have different mentalities of the Federation at the time. When you look at Picard, when you look at Kirk's career, they were still exploring a lot of unknowns and dealing with pretty much every alien race they came across was hostile in some way, shape, or form. It wasn't too long after the 4 Years' War with the Klingons, and the Romulans were still a threat out there. But the Federation in general was more focused in its mission. Under the era with Picard, when you look at it as the golden era of the Federation, as it really has been portrayed to be, they really were a strong pacifist mentality in that we're not going to attack first. We may not even attack at all, but we are strong enough when necessary and when pushed. Like the quote from Commander Shran in Enterprise, "Don't push the pink skins to the thin ice."
Yeah. Almost forgot about that quote.
Yeah. So when you look at it from that standpoint of keeping the context of the commanders in their era, I would actually have to say Picard, because he was a well-rounded individual, but also his leadership style. When he had to put his foot down and push, even if it was an unpopular position, he could do it. He could pull it off. He would flirt with the border of what is and is not acceptable, depending on the situation. Granted, you find that more in the movies than the series itself, but you still have that when push comes to shove, Picard was just as capable as Kirk when it comes to a tactician side. But from what is seen on screen, Picard also had that diplomat side to him to a T.
Almost to a fault.
Almost, yeah.
But then again, Kirk doesn't have a maneuver named after him like Picard does.
Technically, Kirk does, but some people call it cheating. Even though it did get him a commendation for original thinking. But it really is tough between the two when you start to try to break down and analyze things like that, because while Picard has the maneuver named after him legitimately, who out of all of Trek history, how many other captains would do anything they could for a chance to meet Kirk.
There's that.
He didn't need a maneuver named after him because of his history, because of his track record, and people still looked up to him. People still knew him. It's kind of like when you go to the Iliad and the mentality of the Greeks during that age. His name will always be remembered because of what he did. And that whole thing of
NA.
Oh, there's so many things I could point out, but I'll save that for others. Oh, ugly German truce. That is a good one. Although, here's a question. Go back and actually watch the original series. How much of a womanizer was Kirk, actually?
Depends on what your definition of a womanizer is.
I would say not nearly the... I would say Riker has him beat.
Well, that's not hard to do. I mean, Riker's on warp speed as soon as he sees anything that looks female. So,
Although he...
I was going to say, much of the way Paris was at the start of Voyager.
Yeah, but both of them managed to tone it down. It's just it happened sooner with Paris.
Well, when you're dating a half Klingon, that tends to happen, I bet. Well, yeah, Riker did have him virtually beat with Minuet. Oh, I don't have the right soundboard up for that. Damn it.
Oh, that actually is a very good question. I wonder if... Let's see if they actually have it listed. Okay, we actually do have a posting of the Captain Kirk's 8 most impressive love conquests, which would include that image is no longer available, but the character of Ruth from the episode Shore Leave, the android created by Flint, called Reyna, from the episode Requiem for Methuselah. You have Shauna from the Game Masters of Trixkelion, the green-haired one.
Mm-hmm.
Kalinda, who wasn't even humanoid, from the episode of By Any Other Name. Deela from Wink of an Eye. Mirameni from the Paradise Syndrome, when Kirk temporarily lost his memory. Okay, so here's one on the list that really makes you wonder. Elan of Troyes. Did he actually get her or not?
I'm sure there are those that argue either way.
Well, again, part of the issue there is what is actually able to be shown on screen back in that day and isn't.
Really? Miramini, huh? Daughter of Goro. Sorry, I'm looking through his relatives, etc. Um,
Ima does have a good question, and it's one that actually in canon we can confidently answer. Wonder if Worf ever got a mate who didn't die? No. See, and that really is a thing. That is another good question from Ugly German Truths. If it had been Riker's time, so imagine Kirk, imagine the original series on air in the late 80s and early 90s.
mm-hmm.
Would the kiss with Uhura ended where it did, or ended up in a bed?
So we're going. So we're taking Riker and putting him back into '60s television the way that we would have seen it in the '80s and '90s.
Well, yeah. We're taking TOS and moving what is acceptable for screen forward in time to the late 80s, early 90s.
I would probably venture a yes. With a scene of them going to one of their quarters and then after a brief blackout, fade to black, or for a commercial break, or switching to whatever their actions going on, it would end up back with them in bed,
See, I'm not
presumably naked.
I'm not entirely sure about that one with Kirk and Uhura for one main reason. Keep in mind, the kiss was forced by the entities that were manipulating them.
Well, I was going under the premise that Riker was just in general um, a, a womanizer early on, depending on where he was at in the
Yeah.
career. You know what I mean? But yeah, the alien or the entity, whatever you want to call it, Q for all I care, would have could have probably if you think about the way that we allowed things to happen on TV in the 80s and 90s, I think they would have written it to allow for that to happen.
Yeah, see, and this is where I am on the fence with that one, mainly because the premise of it and what they were pushing for was the full show of humanity and the physical exploration. And that's where, when you look at it, I'm not sure how much they would have shown even in that day and age of TV, simply because of the forced aspect to it. While TNG has covered forced pairings before, in that sense, they were more tactful with what they actually showed. Like, think about Troy's child, the when
Yeah.
and that whole thing, and how little they actually showed of the implantation process, which was technically a form of rape.
Yeah, that it was. I how to continue on that thought because there's really nothing else.
Joey D does have a point. They showed Kirk putting his boots on, which back in that day, that was the visual cue for it went on. It happened.
Yeah.
But with all of that, when you put a comparison side by side, it kind of okay. Which crew would you rather be a general crewman on? Would
As
you
long
rather?
as I'm not a red shirt on the TOS.
Uh, Keep in mind, operations was the largest department, so you have a high likelihood of being in that grouping. However, because it was the most populous group, you actually technically have the lowest probability for death, just simply by the numbers.
Yeah, tell that to the red shirts that got in a firefight with the stormtroopers.
Yeah, stormtroopers missed every shot, the red shirt still dies. But, yeah, thinking of it that way, yeah, thinking of everything, I would, I'll admit, I will. While I enjoy the aesthetic of the Constitution class refit, I'll take the TNG era with the hope of being on the Enterprise and being a member of the crew of the Galaxy class, simply because look at how much freaking room you have.
I know. Imagine being just a base officer, a basic, ensign. You had room to spare.
Yeah, well, technically speaking, though, you still junior officers, instead of being in a multi-man berthing like what was actually shown of a number of the crew spaces on the Enterprise in Star Trek 6, you only had one roommate. So it was almost like a college dorm type of
Yeah.
mentality, even on the Enterprise D with the junior officers. But with the first promotion would generally come quarters of your own. Or maybe not to JG, but definitely you make lieutenant, you have your own quarters at that point. So
Yeah. Mm. Still, a college dorm versus, 21 man berthing, I'd gladly take the college dorm. So, I think that in general, if I had to choose, I would probably choose the TNG era as well, just simply because of all the different advances in the technology that you had.
the creature
Holodeck
comforts.
aside, you had the replicators. If you needed a part, you weren't necessarily having to, have it manufactured for you somewhere else on the ship. You could actually just say, "Hey, computer, I need this," and they had industrial sized, replicators in engineering for the bigger parts that they needed. So,
Uh, I'm a put. I'm a would
yeah,
say Voyager to Perv on 7 of 9. I'll counter that with Robin Leffler.
yeah, that's true.
If only she was made more of a recurring character, that would have been fantastic.
Although solely on Voyager though, there's the Delaney sisters.
Did we ever actually get a good look of them?
Yes, there's one where Kim and um, Kim and Paris were coming out of the holodeck with them one time, if I remember correctly.
Hmm. uh, Joey D does kind of have a point. I mean, the Mirror Universe uniforms, it gotta admit, Hoshi,
To
even
Paul.
Hoshi and T'Pol in the Mirror Universe,
Yeah.
not bad choices either. Uh, Ugly German Truce, you do have a point, but I think it would be a tolerable point. Referring to Leffler, had she been a recurring character, she would have been Wesley's girlfriend for 90% of it.
Yeah, but Wesley wouldn't know what to do with it.
Ah, yes, the black and white.
He was enjoying that a little too much, I think.
Yeah, but who? Okay, yeah, the Delaney sisters definitely. They're up there. Not. I'd say upper echelon, second tier.
Let's see, is there anybody comparable in... Well, I mean, obviously T'Pol and Hoshi and Enterprise. Especially if you get the Mirrorverse uniforms. You know, TNG was the only one that didn't do Mirrorverse, wasn't it?
Voyager.
No, Voyager didn't do one either, did they?
No, is DS9, TNG, and Enterprise did. It was every other kind of thing.
You mean TOS?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, just I hate to use the term, but Discovery broke that since you had Enterprise and then you had Discovery as far as the official canon TV series.
Discovery doesn't count.
I'm just being practical here, but I agree it still doesn't count. That's just like episodes 1, 2, and 3, 7, 8, and 9 don't count for Star Wars.
You know, Voyager had the whole thing with parallel dimension ships and Kim not being the original afterwards. That not just Kim,
Naomi
as well, because when the ship was split and Naomi was born, one version the baby didn't make it, the other version the baby did.
Yeah, I'm not counting that because I haven't read the book yet, so.
Huh.
That would make an interesting storyline for a show.
That it would. Although, kind of makes you wonder with the advice that Kirk gave Picard, from his own experience, mind you, which I think was rather relevant and telling. In Generations, after that, when you go back and look at the opening of Nemesis, who communicated with Picard the orders to go to Romulus?
Don't bring that up.
Admiral Janeway, which kind of makes you wonder, how many times did Picard pull a Riker and say, no, I'm fine here?
Well, I also believe that part of I would probably call it beta canon in this case, is that basically after getting back from the Delta Quadrant, Janeway's almost guaranteed her admiralty, so.
True. But at the same time, that only gets you to a 1 pip, a 1 star.
True. And she was, what, a 3 at the time?
Yeah. So it kind of makes you wonder, with the amount of time that should have passed by then, how many times had it been brought to Picard's table to be promoted to Admiral and given further authority. Wasn't he offered the position at Starfleet Academy at one point in canon?
Yes, I believe he was.
So there's at least one. Okay, so Kirk with the shapeshifter Martia in Star Trek VI. Here's the question. How much of that was her interest in him versus her interest in a way out and away from the prison? I would argue that she did and played enough to keep the illusion going to get her own gains of potential freedom.
Here we go.
Hmm.
This is what I was looking for on Memory Alpha. So it would have been a 2-pip, not a 1-pip.
No, because technically they still had the lower half admirals as well.
Yeah.
So that's where it just, yeah, and then
There's no actual lower half.
Oh, well, they didn't have one on screen, and that's the issue.
Yeah.
Is they're going with what was shown on screen, and that's where the prior edition with that wonderfully gaudy bit as well. So just like if you look at the pre-Federation and post-Federation, those two, you don't, just because you don't see a 4-star on screen doesn't mean they didn't have it. Yeah. Yeah, because then here are your lower ranks as well.
Peons. Always interesting to see how they do things like that.
Yeah, it's just... But at the same time, if you open up the discussion to alternate answers of, oh, okay, the question is Kirk versus Picard, how many people do you think would shoot back with Archer? Or Cisco?
The Archer thing, I could see like that. If I could go into anywhere in the Star Trek universe, it would be the early stages of Starfleet when they're getting out with the first Warp 5 ship. I would gladly take on as a, as an enlisted rank on one of those, or even just a junior officer, because that's when you're really getting to do all the really fun stuff and kind of make the rules for everything.
True.
Or rank Cisco higher than Kirk, apparently. Well, actually, Ugly German Truths, Commodore used to be actually a rank in and of itself with the U.S. Navy.
Yep.
Up until the mid-'80s, early '90s.
Mid-'90s.
Yeah.
Mid, almost late 90s. So mid 90s is when they stopped promoting to it and they renamed it. But the position of a Commodore was adjusted around that time to where, so like you with the sub-squadrons, the actual commander of a sub-squadron was a Commodore. The commander of the Atlantic or Pacific subgroup or air group, the position was the Commodore, but the rank of the person there was actually a captain. Hmm. 83? Was it? I thought it was 93. Oh. So here's a question: how would the different captains and their approaches work if you were to switch places with them? Huh. I could see Kirk and Archer having a hard time being relocated to later, but only for a short while. Because I think it's easier to tone back than it is to ramp up.
Yeah.
Because think about it this way. So if you take a hard-nosed battle commander, it is slightly easier to tone down a commander like that rather than have a more diplomat ramp up, which is where Picard comes in because he actually excelled at both. He had that capability. So I could see Picard being effective with his mentality and him in his prime, regardless of the era.
Yeah, Kirk and Archer definitely would have a harder time at first, but I think if depending on if Picard, Cisco, Janeway, if they were able to retain their knowledge of history when they go back,
Mm-hmm.
they could basically effectively become the type of captains they always wanted to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Cisco. Both of them definitely seemed better suited for the fringes, in at least the contested fringes, where Picard was best utilized where the other side of the barrier was already known, a known quantity, like the Romulans and Klingons, the Cardassians. But when it was a true unknown, I can see a heavy bent towards diplomacy being a risk, being too much of a problem because, well, look what happened to Kirk when an apparently friendly ship was coming up on him. He got caught with his britches down.
Yeah. What I think would be interesting is to see what would happen Archer if Archer was able to go into the future and basically beef up his knowledge of Starfleet regulations to what they were, with the Prime Directive and all that, and then get sent to the Delta Quadrant, but by the caretaker. How his command would have changed or been the same as Janeway's all the way through. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, so there are circumstances that have to be taken into account like that. Now, one counter that did actually come from the chat is going to Mirror Mirror and mentioning how, at least in that portrayal, it's easier for a civilized man to act the role of a monster as opposed to vice versa. However, when you look at other Mirror Universe incursions through DS9, as the other reality became aware of the Prime universe and Prime timeline, they were able to effectively mask themselves and act in a way that could go unnoticed. Some personalities couldn't. Sorry, Kira, but your mirror self, she's a bit too much of a hornball.
Just a little bit.
But
Yeah.
but aside from that, the Klingons not much different between the two universes.
The Tholians the same way.
Yep. Tholian same way, Cardassians the same way. You have a lot of those gray area type of characters who really aren't that much different between the two. It's generally your extremes that are flopped. Yeah, I still prefer Esri over Jedzia. It's just my preference.
Yeah. Can't fault you on that one.
Alright.
All right. I don't know where else to go with this topic.
Yeah, it is.
It'd be better if we had the other two here for this.
Well, yeah, especially because I could see at least one of them really countering with Cisco, but Cisco, I'm not sure how much I can get past some of the things he did while going after Eddington.
Oh, how he basically said, "Oh, the Prime Directive doesn't belong here, doesn't need to be known here, yada yada yada."
Pretty much.
Yeah. There are certain things that a Starfleet officer should not do. And he didn't just, put a toe across the line. He put his whole body across the line by about 20 feet.
A few times, yeah.
In many of those cases. So, however, results are results, and sometimes Starfleet looks the other way, especially if it serves to benefit them.
Well, and that's where there are times where Cisco went into that morally gray and dark area, but it was justified. Like the manner to bring the Romulans into the war on the side of the Federation Klingon alliance.
Yeah.
That is one of the instances where the ends do come close enough to justify the means.
LRJ-88. He didn't just cross the line. He jumped over like the fucking Hulk.
Yeah. S2000 GTS. Did Klingons have ranks? Just seemed to be blokes than generals. No, the Klingons actually did have a rank structure. It wasn't more clearly pointed out until you get into the Next Generation. Like when you had that officer exchange program that Riker took part of. You actually had lieutenants and commanders and the captain, and you had that hierarchy. How they managed the hierarchy was different, but they still had it.
Yeah, the let's see here. I just pulled up Memory Alpha really quick. Have fun with that. they're the Klingons were more of like a Marine Army style command, although they did occasionally with the fleet bring up commander and captain.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly what you hear about is the generals, the colonels. So, because here you have the lieutenants, the commanders, captain, colonels, brigadiers,
and then your generals.
Then the fleet admiral. Poor Uncle Will. Or no, Uncle Phil. Sorry.
Yeah, and then, of course, on the political side, you had the council with the chancellor and
Yeah.
they have Kern listed as a captain. Do they also have him listed as a lower? Nope, just the top rank.
Yep. Such dishonor.
Although he was the lucky one that pretty much everyone wanted on their ship after what happened with the Rotaran.
Yep.
So
I do like how they're not showing any of the unmentioned shows. People.
So
the way it should be.
Joey D asked, people on Facebook say that Starfleet was not a military organization. I say that is BS. I say it's as gray as the top of this uniform. They act in a military manner when suited, but they themselves... You can have the command structure and rank system and promotion types that would give the appearance of a military without being a military itself.
Merchant Marines is a good example.
I was actually more going to go towards the public health, Department of Public Health.
Oh, that is true. Surgeon General and all that.
Yeah, because there you have people who do get rank and actually are a uniformed service. They actually do wear the uniform, but they are not military personnel.
If you have access to weapons of mass destruction, you are military. Not necessarily. Are you calling ISIS military? Are you calling the Taliban necessarily military? Sorry to bring politics into this like that, but
So, and this is where I say, Joey brought up the show notes that Roddenberry brought up, and this is where I agree, but it's overall, when you look at the franchise in totality, it is very much a gray area. Because again, they have the structure and they have the means in place to act as a military force when called upon. However, a military outside of time of war is solely a peacekeeping force and preparation for the next battle. Starfleet doesn't do that. Starfleet, in their interwar periods, goes so pacifistic that they start out every armed conflict behind the curve, behind the 8-ball. They are, to date, in canon, they have never been at the forefront of a military action as being the ones in the better position.
Starfleet is certainly not terrorists.
But the Maquis were.
Yeah. And the Maquis had access to pretty much similar weapons. Maybe not as powerful as quantum torpedoes, but... Are we getting into the Stewie pronunciation of Will?
Yeah, well, and before that, weapons of ass destruction, so Taco Bell?
No, Chipotle.
Both.
Especially now they're promoting their carne asada.
Monk Mayfair, the Treaty of Algeron, which banned them from cloaking technology, hamstringed them. I would agree.
Yes,
However,
the
that
Defiant.
that aside, the one time that in canon, the one time that Starfleet tried to be proactive about a threat was with the Borg, which gave us the Defiant class, the Akira, the Steamrunner, the Sovereign class, and the Intrepid class, and the Nova. So you got 6 new designs from that threat. However, when it came time that the Dominion War conflict went from a Cold War to an active engagement, Starfleet got its ass handed to them. And that definitely seemed to be the modus operandi there. But at the same time, it's kind of interesting because the U.S. historically had a similar track record. Prior to the First World War, the U.S. was not really a military power. It ramped up, became competent, got the job done, and then went through a massive downsizing. Then they started getting inklings of it. They tried on a restricted budget and everything, and while actively trying to maintain adhering to the Washington Naval Treaty and everything, tried to keep progressing and bettering themselves. But again, beginning of World War II, the U.S. was behind the 8 ball because they were trying to play by the rules. And similar thing with Starfleet. They tried to play the gentleman's agreement, and at least in the first few rounds of a conflict, it bites them in the ass.
Well, here's an interesting comment by S2000 GT. If every ship has cloaks, no one could find anybody. Not true. Look at what they did in Undiscovered Country.
They were able to there. Also, the Jem'Hadar were able to figure out the cloaking technology pretty frickin' quickly.
Well, when you think about it, though, Spock. Why they didn't come up with this 2 decades before? Beginning of the V'ger crisis and all that, basically in Star Trek canon. Check for the tailpipe, because the thing's emitting ionized gas.
Yeah. Well, so Joey, you gotta remember, even though when you actually look at what the U.S. was doing, at least from the naval standpoint, while the U.S. wanted to maintain an isolationist type of foreign policy, they were still trying to update their fleet while maintaining and adhering to the treaty stipulations in the interwar period. And it bit them in the ass. In the grand scheme of things, the U.S. ended up being one of the ones to come out on top. But again, it was being ill-prepared at the beginning of their entry into the conflict. Cloaks have no honor, and yet one of the races that espouses honor as its fundamental thing oddly does a lot of things that would be counterintuitive to that. Shove a potato in the tailpipe. No, I like the idea of putting a torpedo up the tailpipe is better from an external standpoint. Uh,
Oh God, really?
I will.
Go with Beverly Hills Cop bananas in the tailpipe.
So before,
Although, yes, Justin Franks has the right excuse for the Klingons.
Hmm.
Because in war, winning equals honor.
yeah.
Doesn't matter how you do it, you go for the win. Yes, we did have the production capacity, whereas others did not.
So one of the viewers has had time allowed and would have had him on the panel as well. When put to him, Kirk versus Picard, his answer was pretty short and a rather interesting one.
Oh?
Whoever kicked more people in the face. Kirk, I guess.
Let me take a guess. That would have been one, the voice, Sean Hufford.
Nope. 1 minute debunk.
Yeah, nope, don't need that camera, sorry. An ad on Facebook. Panasonic HC-X1 4K Ultra HD professional camera. Take a wild guess how much that was.
How much?
2,600.
Jeez.
And that's just the camcorder only. If you want the battery charger, it's 2,700.
Oh, God, dude, screw that. All right. So one of the other regular panel members who actually did have a legitimate reason for not being here by my read has this input for the Kirk versus Picard discussion. From Geostreba. My call is Picard because he has the ability to both make unpopular decisions and getting the crew to obey them in the time of need, but also adapt, letting the crew itself figure out how to work more efficiently. Kirk is a little too stubborn about this sometimes. And as for if you're going to call triple timeline theory, I don't think the suggestion is 100% compatible with what we saw in the Enterprise finale, because of the chat between Troy and Riker seems to suggest that they're running in the same timeline as Enterprise.
Did we ever get a response from Furball about this? Or is he still too hungover?
Too hungover, apparently.
I think we should harass him in the show in the chat. Not that I'm saying anybody in the audience should do that. But, we should harass him in the chat.
Yeah. And I agree. The way that the Enterprise series ended was convoluted, to say the least.
ENT can still be a post-first contact change timeline with TOS showing the before.
Yeah.
Ergo, a separate timeline.
Yeah, exactly. When it comes to that, that's where the Enterprise being a post-first contact offshoot, even with how they ended it with the holodeck program and everything, you can still have a lot of similarities between the two. What it should have been before and after, because if you think about it, How much of that episode did they actually go into a lot of the technical side? Like, how much was Riker actually there for, and what was its purpose? It was more the story. It was more the challenge and actually the interpersonal side of everything. Of what happened.
I was gonna say that the that particular episode of Enterprise, you could almost mistake for Prime Timeline because it doesn't talk about anything with the Borg. You know, as far as you know, it's just something entirely different. If you were to show somebody, hey, this is Enterprise, and show that episode first, and then turn around and show the rest of the series, you wouldn't know that that was the end unless somebody told you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it actually could have served as a good introduction to the cast and crew, and then going back to, well, how did we get here?
Oh, I have got a Discord message.
From?
Oh, creaky notification. Uh-oh, in a meme room too. What do I want to be afraid? No.
It's from Creaky. His memes are weak.
No. It's Turquoise Laura making an entire meme channel. Room for it.
Oh, so it's going to get interesting in there. Good to know.
Well, here, I'll share one that has piqued my interest right off the bat.
Wow. Oh, you know, that would have been a more fitting ending, but I don't think Scott Bakula would have went for it. From Ima, Enterprise should have ended with Al turning up and saying Ziggy found how to do the last leap.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised if Al did show up on the set some days just to fuck with Bakula, because from what I hear, they actually had a really good friendship after the show.
Oh, he was a part of a couple episodes.
I know he was, but I mean, I think when they weren't actually going to have him on there, he found a way to get onto the set because he's like, oh, I got some business with Scott, and they'll be like, oh yeah, go right ahead, you know. I would have way too much fun with that. if I was him, you know what I mean?
Oh,
I would have found the prop just to do that, you know what I mean?
And I'm sure someone on the production crew would have let it happen just for the hilarity of it.
Uh-oh.
Do it.
Brady's redoing a stream about streaming. I don't know.
Okay, Dora, I need to know what you mean.
Oh, you didn't watch his last stream about streaming?
No. Oh, no, not that. Dora said, Al is a traitor and deserves 1,000 deaths. Still not enough. I'm wondering why?
Yes, Al was the warden in one of the episodes of Enterprise.
Okay. Yeah. Except Yui wasn't really a traitor. Technically. He was brainwashed.
I think I'm gonna have to go stream on my sports channel shortly hereafter. You heard about the Thursday night football brawl, right?
The brawl?
Yeah.
Well, the indefinite suspension for the one Steeler definitely deserved that.
No, it wasn't a Steeler. It was the Browns who got the indefinite
suspension. Oh, the Browns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he actually physically pulled off the helmet. Now, let's see. I just had my helmet pulled off of my head, and my teammates and the other team are trying to hold that guy back from beating me with it, I'm going to go run right into him and try to pick this fight even more. And what do I get as a penalty for it? A slap on the wrist fine.
Yeah, you know why?
He's the only quarterback the Steelers have.
Exactly.
I don't know. Could you imagine if the Steelers lost Rudolph for the rest of the season? Because that's actually the punishment I think he deserves. They would have to sign Kaepernick or just throw a running back out there to play quarterback.
Again, I can understand
the
why
latter would be the more preferable.
Yeah, I can understand why the league didn't want to suspend Rudolph, but fine.
The whole reason why I bring it up is apparently yesterday, on his show on ESPN, Stephen A. Smith is being informed, or has informed people, that the entire fight last night at the end of the Browns-Steelers game was obviously caused by pure racism and the mistreatment of the poor Browns player who was all but forced to use the helmet as a weapon to make up for his racially motivated mistreatment. I've got to hear this rant.
Mistreatment? How? You know what? We got some time. Do you have that queued up?
I don't have it queued up per se, but let's pull up this one that I have right here. Hold on.
Well, no, I was saying is we can go over and do that on your channel right now.
Oh, I gotta actually switch everything over and do that. But yeah, let's get that queued up here. Hold on just a second.
Yeah, while you're getting...
I don't have a link to that channel.
Well, while you are getting what you need set up for the stream on your end, I will get the link to your channel so people know where to go.
I'm pulling the channel up right now here, so hold on just a second.
But I got it already.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Sweet. Do you know what the name of it is?
Well, you're doing it on your Thoughts by Jay channel, right? Or is it the other one?
I'm going to do it on the other one, the actual football-related one, Serious Football Heads podcast. Or Serious Football Heads is what it's called, actually.
Okay.
Give me just a second. I got the link right here. There you go. That's my other channel. And now I've got to get OBS up.
All right. Well, while he's doing that, we're going to go off air and we will see all of you over on that other channel because this is fascinating. So good night all, and we will see you shortly.
In a few.